Cathie, I just wanted to dispel one question I've been getting all morning as I walk around the show. People are asking me whether or not I'm still bullish on Bitcoin. And I would like to, just clarify that I am more bullish than ever on Bitcoin. The future's bright. So, we're here to talk about what we see in the future. And you've spent a career in institutional investment and capital markets, looking at it from the point of view of an investor. And I spent my career attempting to attract money from people like you, running a company in the public market. And so I think we're both half of the coin. And that's why it's exciting to talk with you today. So, in my mind, I got three main areas: the political, macroeconomic, regulatory environment. What's going on there in the next year to 2 years? And the second is the capital markets and what's going on with large pools of money, the people running the trillions and trillions of dollars. I guess hundreds of trillions of dollars. And then the third is technology. And of course, you love technology, you know the capital markets. We both have political opinions.
Yes.
Okay. So, why don't we start with politics and regulation and economics? What do you see as we look forward, and how do you think it's going to affect Bitcoin?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that's happened, and we met someone from Mississippi, I think a congressman from Mississippi, and I'm seeing the politics around Bitcoin changing radically, because it has become, the single issue that some people are voting on, and this is bipartisan. And even where we've moved in St. Pete, because people know that I'm very Bitcoin focused, the politicians have come to me and said, I want to pull together a room of Bitcoin enthusiasts, and I really want to learn from them what they want from us. Think about that. Think about that. That is a radical shift over the last few years. The other thing that I see, so a year ago, roughly, when Janet Yellen was appointed Treasury Secretary, I remember her first comments about Bitcoin were money laundering, nefarious characters, environmentally damaging. And then 2 weeks ago, someone's whispering in her ear, and we talked about this, you think it might be Gary Gensler. There is someone whispering in the ears of politicians, if you want to lose, if you want the US to lose out on this, one of the most amazing innovation platforms of all times, you keep talking like that. So she has changed her tune. So I'm very positive here. And of course, we're meeting people from around the world, just met from Honduras, Mexico. I think the movement is spreading pretty quickly now.
Yeah, I think the last 12 months has been just a 180-degree turn. If you roll back 12 months, you had so many smart people that had a lot of money and power saying, Bitcoin looks too good to be true. It's so good, someone's going to ban it. Right? We heard that. And I think a couple of weeks ago, with the executive order, what we had was the President of the United States giving a green light to Bitcoin. You have a one-page memo and it says, whereas 40 million Americans, rely upon this, and this is part of their future, I hereby direct every government agency to get educated on Bitcoin and figure out how you incorporate it into the government. And I think that if I scan the last 100 years of history, and I ask, when's the last time the President of the United States directed the government to embrace a new asset class? The answer is never. So I think that Bitcoin should be taking a victory lap for what happened here just in the past few weeks in the United States government, because a year ago, Bitcoin was maybe it was Eastern technology and it wasn't Western technology, and maybe the government was going to ban it and we're afraid of it. And what happened in the last 12 months is Bitcoin moved west, Bitcoin has been embraced. The administration has given a green light to Bitcoin. And, you know, Congress and the Senate are enthusiastically figuring out Bitcoin, and now there's a little jockeying, I think, about who can be the most pro-Bitcoin politician.
Yes, bipartisan. This is a bipartisan issue. It's bringing our country together in many ways, which is, given what we've just been through, so shocking. The one thing that I will say we need to watch out for is, you know, in China a few years ago, it was blockchain technology all the way, we're going to lead the way. And then, of course, they banned everything in favor of their own CBDC, of course, the Digital Yuan. I don't hear talk about that here, and I haven't heard much talk about, hey, this is going to displace the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. That's very good that we're not hearing that kind of rhetoric, but I am sure as the elections evolve, someone will raise it as an issue. Nonetheless, I think the momentum is clearly behind Bitcoin now.
I mean, the momentum is clearly behind Bitcoin. Yes. A lot of people have anxiety about regulation, and they ask me, aren't you afraid? And I do not have anxiety about regulation. You know, when I look at this, I say, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be worked through. FASB's working through some accounting issues, FDIC's working through some banking issues, SEC's working through some security issues. You know, the administration's working through all their issues. But regardless of how fast that happens and how sharp that occurs, I don't think there's any outcome other than favorable for Bitcoin. And I think that what I say over and over again is Bitcoin is the ethical safe haven for any public figure, and it is the technical safe haven for any technical company, and it is the financial safe haven for any investors. So if you have anxiety, I think that people that are thinking about this are going to realize that Bitcoin is the risk-off crypto asset network, and all of this regulation is going to create volatility, but ultimately the single number one most important issue is you walk into a room with people that have collectively 10 or 20 trillion dollars, and you tell the story, and they say, well, you know, Bitcoin sounds better than gold, and Bitcoin sounds better than owning a big tech stock, and Bitcoin sounds like the solution to all the world's problems, and it's just so good that someone is going to take it away from me because it's too good. And what you need is this one-page memo from the White House saying, no, we're not taking it away from you. Well, and then at that point, people can start to put billions of dollars into this asset.
Sure, and I think we have someone at the SEC who is behind Bitcoin. At MIT, certainly that was the case. And, you know, the SEC has declared, as we all know, that Bitcoin is not a security. Now, Gary Gensler is talking pretty aggressively about everything else out there being a security. So I think this has elevated Bitcoin from a risk point of view, not to a lower risk. I shouldn't say elevated. It's actually lowered the risk that it's so clear Bitcoin is not a security, and everything else, at least in Chairman Gensler's eyes, is.
So the regulatory future is bright. Let's talk about economics. Look, I think economically, everything that we're seeing in the last 12 months, inflation, war in Ukraine, Russian sanctions, the Canadian trucker crisis, CPI, unexpected PPI, and anxiety about how to manage a portfolio. All of these things have been bullish for Bitcoin, and anybody that thinks about it would realize that although they're unfortunate and unpleasant for the world, they have underscored to every mainstream objective observer the use case for a global non-sovereign store of value crypto asset like Bitcoin in a way that none of Michael Saylor's talking ever would.
Yes. Michael and I had a very spirited discussion yesterday afternoon about inflation as an issue, or is it ultimately going to go away? And we don't agree on everything, but one thing that I know and that we agree on is that if inflation is an issue, clearly Bitcoin is a great hedge against inflation. When we look at the deflationary impact of the various technologies that around which we have centered our research, we think longer-term deflation and creative destruction associated with disruptive innovation, that's the bigger risk. And when you think about Bitcoin in those terms, you're thinking about a hedge against counterparty risk. So if we're going to have this debt deflationary bust that some still worry about out there, you've got Bitcoin as a hedge against that. So, you know, it's, as an investor, whenever I hear win-win, I usually don't believe it. But as it is very interesting to watch the equity markets, or the investors in equity markets, treating Bitcoin and other crypto assets like they are treating the rest of tech, which is not very well of late, and to see the holding behavior in the Bitcoin community. I think is it 70% of the Bitcoin outstanding, so roughly 13.5 million units of the 19 are in long-term holding hands, so more than 6 months. So the community gets it, and my fellow investors will get it with time, but in the meantime, it's going to be a very nice ride.
So I mean, that's a good segue to technology, because I think you're very enthusiastic about technology. I'm very enthusiastic about technology. And I think that technology is going to drive adoption of Bitcoin more aggressively in the coming 36 months, even than it has in the last 36 months. I guess I'd like to take a moment to give a shout out to Cash App and to Kraken, because I think both of those companies have done an enormous service for the Bitcoin community by integrating Lightning into their platforms, and I think they've thrown down the gauntlet. You know, if I put away my macroeconomic hat and just think as a technologist, if you're a technical entrepreneur, if you're a venture capitalist, if you're trying to figure out what's the next great thing, I think it has to involve Lightning in somehow. And if I look at the industry, I think every crypto exchange, if they're going to remain viable and competitive, they need to build Lightning into their exchange. And so I hope the people that run exchanges that don't have Lightning are listening to my presentation. I think that the lesson that's being shown to all of us is, if you want to be successful, then you adopt the Bitcoin standard. And the Bitcoin standard is, you buy Bitcoin, you hold Bitcoin, you support the Bitcoin protocol, and then you support the layer 2 open source permissionless Lightning protocol, so that your company can trade and transact with all of the other hundreds, soon to be thousands, soon to be hundreds of thousands of companies in this entire asset economy at the speed of light, friction-free. Cathie, what do you think about technology trends that are going to impact Bitcoin?
Well, I agree with you on the Lightning Network. I was fascinated. We were studying the announcement this morning, and there's so much friction. There has been so much friction involved in the process that taking away some of that friction, whether it's direct deposit, you can put 2% of your paycheck into Bitcoin, or the idea that I don't need to know whether I'm on the Lightning Network or on the base layer. I can transact. I can become a part of this community and not have the friction. I think they're pulling a lot of the difficulty, complexity out. I've watched the number of Lightning channels. They're up to 84 to 90,000. That's nearly a triple over the last year. That's probably because of El Salvador. With this announcement, I think the number of channels is going to explode. The liquidity, we think, is going to go from, and I should say we, in the audience, we have Yassine Elmandra and Frank Downing, my secret weapons in terms of Bitcoin and everything crypto, for example. But we think that the liquidity, which has gone up tenfold in dollars, fourfold in Bitcoin over the last year, that's just a taste of what's going to happen now that Cash App is going to make this, make it so much easier to use the Lightning Network. And I also say follow the developers. I think we're going to see an explosion of developers focused on the Lightning Network. And so now I think this has been the missing link in terms of the use case. Store of value, yes, it's always been there. Means of exchange and unit of account now have a much better opportunity for Bitcoin to dominate long term.
I didn't mention BitPay, but I got to say I was really excited this week when I read that BitPay is also supporting Lightning, and it made me think. We're in a year, right, 2022, where people are going to start to realize that not supporting Lightning is like not supporting the internet, right? If you don't support Bitcoin, you don't support sound economics or integrity. But if you don't support Lightning, it's just kind of like cutting yourself off from the internet. And it's so much so that you start to think that I don't want to do business with a company that doesn't get on board with Lightning. Like, I got to find another vendor. And I'll tell you another exciting thing about Lightning. I'm really excited about the speed and transaction velocity. I'm excited about the interoperability everywhere in the world. I'm also excited about what Lightning Labs announced this week with their Taro protocol, because if we can move USD stable coins at the speed of light over the Lightning Network, then I think the killer application in the world is going to be when 6 billion people, maybe 8 billion people, when your 3-year-old's got it, when 8 billion people run around with a mobile phone, with an Android or iOS app, and they've got a Lightning wallet, and that wallet has got some BTC in it as a store of value, and it's got some USD or Euro or CNY or whatever as a medium of exchange. And then you're going to see tens of trillions and then hundreds of trillions of dollars all moving on Lightning rails secured by the Bitcoin network. And then people are going to wake up and realize, holy crap, this stuff really is going to change the world.
You know, I often, when we're trying to impress upon investors how important this movement is, what I usually say is, okay, listen to this and listen to every word, because every word is important. Bitcoin is the first global. That's really important, as Michael said. Private. Now, it's open source, but there's no government involvement. So private. So first global, private, digital, rules-based monetary system in the history of the world. It is a very big idea. Yeah.
Any form of money moving at any frequency instantly anywhere in the world over Bitcoin, right, is such a beautiful vision. So let's talk about capital markets. I just think we've made enormous progress. 18 months ago, MicroStrategy bought $250 million of Bitcoin. People thought we were crazy. And everybody said, well, you bought it, you're not gonna buy any more, and when are you gonna sell it? You know, and then it promptly traded down, and we were down $50 million, and people were dancing on my grave, gleefully speculating about when the board of directors were going to fire me. And then we finished a Dutch auction and we bought 175 million more. And I thought, well, I got it 20% cheaper. Why wouldn't I? And then people thought, well, you're going to stop. And then we didn't stop. And then Square, now Block, bought Bitcoin. And then Tesla bought Bitcoin. And we bought more Bitcoin. We're up to 6 billion Bitcoin. By the way, if you want to turn 250 million into 6 billion, buy Bitcoin. Don't buy gold. If I bought gold, I would have had $250 million worth of gold instead of $6 billion worth of Bitcoin. So when I say it's a lever and it's a ladder, I mean, yes, it's a ladder. So now at the end of, right about now, we got 24 publicly traded miners. We got another dozen public companies. We've got $100 billion worth of assets flowing in this economy. Investment banks are doing deals, they're doing ATMs, they're doing convertible debt, we've done junk bonds, we've done all sorts of things. And I feel like the capital market's coming alive. From my perspective, Cathie, 24 months ago, I went to Merrill Lynch and I said, I want to buy Bitcoin. They laughed at me and said, not only will I not sell it to you, we're not allowed to talk about it or we get fired. Like, okay, well, then I wired like $175 million out of that bank and I went somewhere else. And, you know, I think the here is now my inbox has Bitcoin research from Merrill Lynch sent to me by the same broker. Like, we're covering it now. This is what we think. So every bulge bracket firm is starting to cover it. They're all grudging that they're going to start to trade it. It's coming. And you've got all these publicly traded companies that are leading the way. I'm interested in your perspective as an investor. How do you see the capital markets and their attitude toward Bitcoin today versus a year or 2 years ago?
Well, it's improved, but it's a long way from, being fully accepted, embraced, and so forth. What we're seeing with Bitcoin and traditional institutional investors is the same thing ARK is seeing about all of our strategies, associated with all of our strategies. They're very volatile. That's scary for institutional investors. There's no index. They're not in my index. So, this would be very risky to get involved. This is a new asset class, and we don't even know what the regulations are. So we're seeing a lot of pushback still that way. But as many of you may know, in our Big Ideas 2022, which is at ark-invest.com, we have a price target in 2030 for Bitcoin of more than $1 million per Bitcoin. And yeah, see, even you can't believe it. I expected a big roaring no, but and if you go in and you'll see how we build that case, we see institutional investors, all we expect over the next 8 years is that 2.5%, roughly 2.5% of assets, institutional assets, are allocated to Bitcoin. So we don't need a lot. And if it's more than that, and that's how institutional investors work. They tiptoe in. In the 70s, it was real estate. In the 80s, it was emerging markets, 80s and 90s. And now I think it's going to be crypto, starting with Bitcoin. And that's very important, starting with Bitcoin, because they understand what it is and what it's not. It's not a securities.
Nice. So we got to wrap it up here. We got to wrap it up here, but I leave you with two thoughts. One, whenever I meet with very powerful people, politicians, senators, Congress, persons, governors, or whenever I meet with billionaires or CEOs, normally what they say to me is, my daughter or my son said you're a rock star and I have to meet you. Okay? And they're like, I had a guy come to my house. I met his son, and the next day, the son brought his father, and his father could, buy the entire city of Miami. And he said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I know Bitcoin is really important, and my son says I got to sit down and listen, and so I orange pilled him for 2 hours. And I'm not going to say who, because it's such a common story, but my point here is, every one of you knows someone. Go tell a CEO, go tell your father, go tell your mother, go tell somebody that Bitcoin's going to change the world and they should figure out more about it, because the number one thing you can do is educate the world on Bitcoin and let people know they need to figure out Bitcoin. And every one of you does make a difference, because I would never get those meetings if it wasn't like someone that went and said, you got to pay attention. And my last point to you, you do not sell your Bitcoin. Thank you. Thank you.